All right, welcome to Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and Kasparian with you guys. So obviously we got a lot to say about what is going to happen with Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat, as I've been promising you all weekend. We've got tape on that, and we've got options for you guys. I also want to tell you, as I often do at the beginning of this show, about some upcoming programming. This one's on Thursday. There's actually two on Thursday. One is, make sure you're checking out TYT Sports on Twitch. Ricky does a great interactive show. You guys can talk to him there. That's at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/TYT. Okay. Now on the same night, on Thursday, September 24th, we're actually presenting the Imagen Awards. It's their 35th annual awards, and Ida Rodriguez is hosting. You guys are gonna love it. It's at 8 o'clock Eastern, right here. So when I say right here, tyt.com/live, but it's also up on all of our channels, YouTube, Facebook, and all of our platforms. So you could watch it anywhere where we are. Okay, so those are great shows. We got another great show coming up for you guys tomorrow, which I'm gonna tell you more about later. But let's get started, because giant news, obviously, with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Right, all right, let's do it. So Donald Trump is committed to choosing a Supreme Court nominee, he says, as soon as the end of this week. And of course, this is meant to fill the vacant seat left behind following the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, he shared his thoughts during a recent interview with Fox News. Let's take a quick listen to what he had to say.
There are actually five I'm looking at. It's down to five. And they're all, it could be any one of them. They'll all be great. These are really top people. To get on that list, I created a list.
Mr. President, who's the other two?
I'd rather not say, but they're two fantastic people. So I'm looking at five, probably four, but I'm looking at five very seriously. I'm going to make a decision on either Friday or Saturday. I will announce it either Friday or Saturday.
So he will announce his decision late this week, either Friday or Saturday, as you heard in that clip. And I would argue that part of the reason why he didn't name the other two potential Supreme Court nominees is because he knows nothing about any of the nominees, including the individuals on his list. You're gonna see why I think that in just a minute. But first, let me give you some background information that I do think is relevant when it comes to this fight. Number one, there are some Republican senators who disagree with holding a vote for a Supreme Court pick until after the election. They want to wait until after the election to do it. Two moderate Republicans, I wouldn't say they're moderate, I'll explain why in a second, but Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski cannot support a vote on nominee before voters decide whether Trump will hold office for a second term. Democrats need just two more of the 53 GOP members in the Senate to peel off to stymie the effort. So there are some Republicans who might agree with Collins and Murkowski. For instance, you have Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney hasn't committed to anything yet, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is urging Republican senators to keep their powder dry and not commit to anything. But Collins and Murkowski are facing tough re-election battles. Well, Collins certainly is. And in both states, Donald Trump's approval rating is pretty low. And so it's not really about their ideological beliefs. It's more about maintaining their political positions and their place in the Senate. Also, when you look at public polling, you'll see that the majority of Americans, 62%, agreed the vacancy should be filled by the winner of November 3rd. So of course the general election, while 23% disagreed and the rest said they were not sure. 8 out of 10 Democrats felt this way, and 5 in 10 Republicans, surprisingly, also felt this way. So Cenk, before we get to some details about the potential Supreme Court picks, I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm actually surprised it's 5 out of 10 Republicans, but maybe it's because they really drilled into everybody's head through Fox News and other outlets. Remember, it is definitely a rule that you do not fill a Supreme Court seat the year before an election, because that was the Mitch McConnell rule that they put on Merrick Garland. And I guess it takes a couple of days or weeks to undo that brainwashing and put in new brainwashing saying, no, actually when it's super close to an election, it's awesome to fill the seat. So that's what Fox News and Trump and McConnell are busy doing now. So we'll see how the polling moves. But right now, that message hasn't gotten to some Republicans. Probably by the end of this process, instead of it being 5 out of 10 Republicans, it'll be 2 out of 10 Republicans who think that they shouldn't fill that seat. Most will think that they will. So now, are the Republicans going to fill that seat? Of course they are. I mean, Jess writes in our member section, the Republicans do not care about being called out for their lies nor their hypocrisy. They only care about their power. That's 100% right. I love our members, tyt.com/join to become one. So in terms of Trump, he wants it before the election. Now, anyone who thinks that this is anything but political is hilarious. So your point about Collins is 100% true, but it has a second part of it that's very important. She's saying, hey, we gotta wait till election day. Okay, but remember, the most likely outcome is that they confirm the person in the lame duck session. That's after election day and before the new Congress is seated. So I would be shocked if the Susan Collins of the world, if after losing their election was like, no, you know what? I said it, so I'm just gonna stay with it. No, all that the GOP cares about is power. So they will do whatever it takes to get that person in that seat.
Look, if I were a Republican voter, I'm keeping it real. I'd be super proud of them, right? You think Republicans care about hypocrisy? No, they want control, they want power. And Republican lawmakers are gonna do what it takes to ensure that they accumulate that power and they get that Supreme Court vacancy filled by someone who's ideologically similar to themselves and the Republican electorate. That's how politics works. And unfortunately, we don't have the same line of thinking when it comes to Democratic leadership. And we'll get into details about that later on in the show. We have a story produced specifically for that topic. But I do wanna talk a little bit about some of the names that have come up recently in regard to Trump's Supreme Court nominee. He has said that he wants to choose a woman, number one. And among the judges thought to be likely candidates are Amy Coney Barrett. We've actually heard her name before, a favorite of social conservatives who sits on the Chicago-based 7th US Circuit Court of Appeals, and Barbara Lagoa, a recent addition to the 11th Circuit, which is located in Atlanta. Now I'm gonna get into details about Barrett in just a second, but to go back to the point about how Trump knows nothing about any of these nominees. He knows nothing about the people he put on his potential nominee list. Get a load of how he answered questions about Lagoa specifically. Take a look.
First on Lagoa, this is the first time we had a chance to look at her bio outside legal circles. We know about Judge Barrett. Tell me about Lagoa and what made her a finalist and what might tip the scales her direction.
Well, she's excellent. She's Hispanic. She's a terrific woman from everything I know. I don't know her. Florida. We love Florida. So she's got a lot of things, very smart. They're all very smart. We don't have to say that.
She's got a lot of things. She's very smart. So he knows nothing about Lagoa. And the reason why Republican lawmakers, particularly Republican lawmakers out of Florida, like her is because she's a Cuban American, and the Latino vote is incredibly important. So they're hoping that Trump chooses her because it could help when it comes to a possible contested general election. Go ahead, Cenk.
She is person, woman, camera, TV, Florida. So I like her. My advisors told me it could help me win Florida in the election. Did I mention she's Hispanic? No, you're supposed to say things about her judicial career. You're supposed to at least bother pretending that you care about the legal aspect of this rather than purely political aspect of it. In fact, you're supposed to pretend that politics is an afterthought. Oh, I mean, the politics. I really care about judicial principles here. Now, look, in a sense, I enjoy that he gets rid of the normal theatrics of politics, because every politician that does tell you that they care about her judicial record and not about politics is lying. They're all lying. They only care about the politics of it, Republicans and Democrats, except the Democrats' version of politics is lay down and immediately surrender, which is what they're starting to do on this issue. So, Anna, you could tell he didn't make the list when in the earlier clip he insisted, now this is the list I put together. He doesn't even know the other two. You know, they asked him the other two. He couldn't name their name right now, even after the interview. He didn't bother learning anything. That would require reading past a page or reading past 3 names. Of course he doesn't know them, and of course all he cares about is the politics. He's just so ham-handed that he actually admits it.
I know, and he's never been punished in any way, politically speaking, for refusing to do his homework. I mean, he's gotten by with giving incredibly vague answers on everything from Supreme Court nominees to his so-called policy proposals. His voters don't care. But when it comes to the ability to pack the courts with conservative judges, his supporters do care, and oftentimes they do refer to that when they're confronted with questions about how Trump failed to deliver on a host of other issues. And so I do think that this is something that's going to energize Trump's base. And Cenk, look, I want Democrats to fight. I do think that there might be some avenues in which they can fight this, and we'll get to that in a second. But I do think that Democrats hurt themselves. I mean, first with what they did in 2013 by essentially getting rid of the 60 vote threshold in order to confirm nominees. Now that did not apply to Supreme Court nominees, but then in 2017, Mitch McConnell's like, I don't like the way they're treating Gorsuch, so I'm going to get rid of this 60 vote threshold as it pertains to Supreme Court nominees, and instead we're going to use a simple majority, which is why in this particular case, all Republicans need is a simple majority. That's it. They don't need a 60 senator threshold in order to hold a vote and to approve this nominee. So that's just something to keep in mind. And so, I mean, I don't know how you feel about that. I feel like in case after case, Democrats change the rules in ways that then later come back and bite them in the butt.
No, look, I've said it 1,000 times, they're paid to lose because, and I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking. I told you as Harry Reid was changing that rule, hey schmuck, why would you change the rule on filibusters when all the polling indicates that you're about to become the minority in the Senate? So you're gift wrapping something that you could have used for 8 years of Obama that you chose not to use, but you're gonna gift wrap it for the Republicans when they get in charge and control the Senate. And people are like, oh no, Jake, you don't understand. They play 3-dimensional chess. No, he played 1-dimensional checkers. And so, of course, the Republicans then captured the majority in the Senate and did everything that they wanted because of how incredibly dumb Harry Reid and all of the Democrats are. I mean, you're gonna see how dumb they are in this particular case as we talk about it later in the show. They couldn't do real politics against Republicans if their life depended on it. And of course, the whole game is that corporate donors pay them to play the patsies, the controlled opposition. So the controlled opposition is supposed to lose, and that's what they're in the middle of doing now.
And finally, since I promised, who is Amy Coney Barrett? Well, she is extremely conservative, which certainly worries advocates of reproductive rights. She says that she does not allow her Catholic religion to influence the rulings she hands down or the decisions that she makes. Democrats pointed to comments she made at Notre Dame years before about being a different kind of lawyer. She said, we should always remember that a legal career is but a means to an end, and that end is building the kingdom of God. Out of law school, she clerked for Antonin Scalia, who she considers a mentor and with whom she shares a belief in originalism, which is the idea that judges should attempt to interpret the words of the Constitution as the authors intended when they were written. And so look, a lot of people are worried about the reversal of Roe v. Wade with a majority conservative court. I totally understand that. Other things to be worried about include the absolute overwhelming repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which would mean that Americans would no longer have protections against insurers denying them for pre-existing conditions. There really is a lot on the line here. And even though everyone's focusing on Roe v. Wade, which is important, I'm not trying to diminish that. There are a number of other issues that would negatively impact Americans overall that go beyond reproductive rights.
And if we lose the Affordable Care Act right now, coronavirus becomes a pre-existing condition. boom. And that's another 6 million people who can't get insurance. So that's if you just stop right now. Reality is that'll be well over 10 million by the time that this is done. So, and by the way, Citizens United will then become permanent. So it's disaster on top of disaster. One more comment from our members, because it's such a good one. Someone who likes Bernie Sanders wrote, and that's their title actually on our website. I think Trump voters are on board for waiting until after the election because they're 100% sure that Trump is going to win. So it's less about principles and more about what's the rush. It's true, in their world, Trump has a 90% chance of winning. So they're like, who cares? Let's just do it after the election. What difference does it make? Because we all live in our own bubbles and they can't read polling. But look, it's got everybody energized. Just in the time we were doing this video, people who became members by clicking the join button below on YouTube, Barry Wheeler, Maricela Guillen, Curbside Odin, Adona Langer, Mary Gladstone, LPS Grace, 331. So look, we got to be stronger. Progressives have to be stronger because corporate Democrats are never going to do the job. So I hope they can step out of the way and let us actually work effectively to block whoever Trump is going to appoint.
All right, let's move on to our next story.
To be clear, you're not taking any arrows out of your quiver. You're not ruling anything out.
Good morning, Sunday morning. We have a responsibility. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. We have a responsibility to meet the needs of the American people.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's interview with George Stephanopoulos over the weekend did not inspire much confidence among Democratic voters who want Democratic lawmakers to fight back against Donald Trump attempting to fill a vacant Supreme Court seat left behind by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg due to her passing. Now, in the rest of the interview, maybe she says something that does inspire some confidence. Maybe she says something strong. But if you've been following Nancy Pelosi for years now, you should know better than to expect that, because when it comes to simple things she can do, like refusing to fund the next spending bill, that kind of stuff seems to be off the table. Here she is giving us more of what she's unwilling to do.
So you said you want people to get out there and vote, but even that's no guarantee that the White House and Senate Republicans won't try to push through a Supreme Court nomination in a lame duck session, even if Joe Biden wins on November 3rd, even if Democrats pick up seats in the House and maybe even the Senate. So what can you do then? Some have mentioned the possibility, if they try to push through a nominee in a lame duck session, that you and the House could move to impeach President Trump or Attorney General Barr as a way of stalling and preventing the Senate from acting on this nomination.
Well, we have our options. We have arrows in our quiver that I'm not about to discuss right now. But the fact is, we have a big challenge in our country. This president has threatened to not even accept the results of the election with statements that he and his henchmen have made. So right now, our main goal, and I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg would want that to be, would be to protect the integrity of the election as we protect the American people from the coronavirus.
Now, Cenk, I haven't seen her do anything when it comes to protecting the integrity of the elections. She held hearings for Postmaster Louis DeJoy, who we know was trying to dismantle the post office to make it difficult for people to vote by mail. I don't know what action she specifically took following those hearings. Just over the weekend, Trump protesters were blocking voters from entering polling stations in Virginia. I haven't really seen much action from Democratic leadership when it comes to protecting our election process. I also don't see any strength from her when it comes to fighting back against Trump's potential Supreme Court nominee. But maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, so far, every Democrat that's gone on TV has been an absolute disaster and only hurt our cause. So I'm going to be very specific about what I mean by that. So I don't want you to think it's loose talk. So sure, first there's her general appearance, which was just disastrous. If you watch the whole interview, that line she had that we showed you in the beginning about "Good morning, it's Sunday" was not at the beginning of the interview. It was weirdly in the middle of the interview. It made no sense at all. And so you could tell Stephanopoulos, who keep it real, is a huge corporate Democrat and wants to help Pelosi. When Pelosi was saying that, had this look on his face like, oh, that's uncomfortable, right? And so I don't know what she thought she was saying there, but that's the least of it. So she kept using her talking points about how they were going to crush coronavirus, but Trump wouldn't let them crush coronavirus. She must have said that about 5, 6, 7 times. Concentrate. He's asking you about the Supreme Court. I know you want to do your regular talking points about the election. God bless. Squeeze that in once or twice, but answer the questions. And if you don't, you look weird. He's asking you specific questions, which are really important. And that is when you should energize Democratic voters, not with generic poll tested stuff from a month ago, but from stuff today when everybody's super mad about Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing away and Mitch McConnell and the Republicans being hypocrites. This is when you go on TV to hit them and hit them hard. Instead, she comes on TV, and in that interview, she said, blocking the continuing resolution on the budget? Nope. We would never do that. So we'll not shut down the government. Raising the debt ceiling, Stephanopoulos didn't specifically ask about that. He should have, although he did a great job on the interview overall. And she basically said for both of those options, which the House can do. I say we, but it's not, Democrats aren't we. Democratic leadership isn't we. If they actually were on our side, that would be the very first thing they would have as an option. If the Republicans violate their own rule, it forces us to not have any further votes. And the way you don't have further votes is you block the continuing resolution and the debt ceiling. She immediately took that off the table. Okay, so already the surrender has begun. So you went on TV to help Republicans by telling them, don't worry, we will not use the most powerful tool in our arsenal. Then she talks about, hey, all the quivers are in my, all the arrows are in my quiver. No, they're not. You just took a giant one off. Then Tim Kaine goes on TV and says, we definitely won't do impeachment. Okay. No Democratic senator is in favor of that. Boom, there goes all of your leverage. They just destroyed all of our leverage and surrendered on day one.
So I actually really do want to go to that Tim Kaine video because Tim Kaine is a senator. And so, and we never hear from Tim Kaine. So finally he comes out of the shadows and has something to say, but it's the worst statement at a time when people are desperately seeking Democratic leadership. Look.
Would you support impeaching either President Trump or Attorney General Bill Barr as a way to essentially delay the Senate on a vote for the president's court nominee?
Foolish idea. I can't see virtually any Senate Democrats agreeing with it.
Okay, so that seems off the table. What about the idea of if you win a Senate majority next year and Republicans do get this nomination through, adding more seats to the Supreme Court?
I'm not playing an if game. What I'm doing, Hallie, is asking Republicans to be true to their word. So I'm just asking, are there 4 Republicans who are willing to keep their word to the American public?
Senator, I understand you don't want to talk hypotheticals, but this is potentially a reality here. I want to just ask you where you are on these positions.
Hallie, you can ask me hypotheticals, but that doesn't mean I'm focused on them. I'm focused on trying to convince Republicans to keep their word to the American public. I don't want the Republicans to try to destroy the Senate as an institution or the Supreme Court as an institution. If they decide to violate their promises and violate their principles and just say, well, the only thing that matters is raw power. If you got the votes, you can do whatever you want. I don't think that's going to work out well for them, and I don't think it's going to work out well for the American public. So I just hope some of them will keep their word.
No.
Just embarrassing, unbelievably embarrassing that at this point in Trump's first term, that he thinks that, maybe I can pressure Republican lawmakers to do the right thing, to have some moral high ground and actually follow through on what they promised to follow through on. Because remember, Lindsey Graham and other Republican senators, after blocking Merrick Garland, argued that they would, do the same if Trump or a Republican president tried to nominate a Supreme Court justice during an election year. It is about raw power. We all know that. Tim Kaine knows that. It's just, I feel like they want to lose. It's like there has to be some reason behind it. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, okay, no, guys. So let me quickly go over, because I did another video about this. the 5 different ways that Democrats can actually do something about this. One is block every vote, demand unanimous consent in the Senate. Now that doesn't block it for good. What it does is it slows things down. So far they have not shown any inclination to go in that direction, but no one has taken that off the table. Continuing resolution and debt ceiling, those are 2 and 3. Pelosi took those off the table in her ABC interview. Impeachment, Tim Kaine just took that off the table and said no Democratic senator wants to do that, even though it would be super simple and would actually be effective because it gets prioritized above actual confirmation hearings on the Senate. So the Senate would not have a choice. So it'd be very effective. Kaine eliminated that now. And then the last part is packing the court, because the court is not, 9 members is not in the Constitution. That is statutory, and you actually can put as many people on the Supreme Court as you want. And now it is a harsh thing to do, but at the very minimum, you need to keep that as a possibility to threaten to have leverage, right? Tim Kaine took it off the table. So they literally have nothing left on the table because their 2 idiots went on TV and said, we're not gonna do that, and we're not gonna do that, and we're not gonna do that, and we're not gonna do that. So Republicans, do whatever you want. And guys, I call them idiots for 2 reasons, okay? If it was an accountant or a plumber or a dentist, I wouldn't call them idiots, because I'd say, hey, listen, they don't know all the inner workings of politics, both legislatively and technically what they could do in the Senate and the House, and they don't know how this game is played. It's okay, but this is their job. And the second reason is the mainstream media come and gaslight you and tell you that these guys are master legislators. No, Tim Kaine, if you take all of our leverage off the table when you go on television, that means you went on television to help Republicans, not to help Democrats. And so what was his answer? So his answer was, you saw with your own eyes, I believe I could put pressure on the Republicans to do the right thing if I just talk to you on TV and say, now guys, remember what you promised. No, but that's my point. No one can be that stupid. Like literally, then Tim Kaine is the most naive, foolish, ridiculous man in Washington. Or he's trying to help Republicans. He just went on there. No Republican could have done a better job in assuring fellow Republicans that they would get exactly what they want. How could you have sat through the last 20 years, let alone the last 4 years, let alone what happened to Merrick Garland, and say that we think we can get Republican senators to do the right thing and not just to do something for their own power? No, you'd have to be the dumbest man in America. Remember, Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's pick to be her VP, because the Democrats never, ever want to fight for our side. All they care about is their own privilege and power. They sicken me.
When we come back from the break, we'll show you how little Republican lawmakers care about being called hypocrites. And Cenk has a fun announcement about Wolfpack. We'll be right back.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of On the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Let me give you guys some comments as usual, and then got an important announcement for you guys. LMG15 writes in, at this point, I have to believe that McConnell gets off on being the #1 hypocrite in American politics. Yeah, he does enjoy his role, and I don't blame him for it. And he says he's the grim reaper of all democratic ideas. So he at least understands how politics works. He is in the opposition, and he's excellent in opposing democratic and progressive ideas. Whereas our side is a bunch of fools and nincompoops. And I think he does enjoy it. Someone who likes Bernie Sanders, another good comment. I don't care if there are arrows in her quiver if she doesn't fire any of them. That's exactly right. And so that's our members on our website, tyt.com/join. On YouTube, since I last read the names, Ground Loop Events, Drizzt12 and Joseph Losada have joined, and you could do that by hitting the join button right underneath the video on YouTube. Willie Thomas on YouTube Super Chat says, impotent, plain and simple, referring to the Democrats. Jason R says, start impeachment on Barr now, we'll stall before the election, then Trump again during the lame duck. That's right, if you don't start now, you won't be able to make it in time. By the time that the election is over, they'll have already gone through all of the process, and all they'll need is a vote. So that's the game plan. They're very likely going to do it in the lame duck session, and that's when, after the Democrats refuse to do anything, they will say there was nothing we could do. So that's the same playbook that we've seen 20 different times. By the way, apparently every reporter in Washington is a moron because they can't see that same playbook that you yourself have seen now dozens of times, But none of the reporters report, hey, these same moron Democrats are saying, hey, there's nothing we can do, when there's actually half a dozen things they could do. So anyway, I gotta tell you about Wolfpack. So Wolfpack's having its annual conference this upcoming weekend. And it starts on Friday, goes all the way through Sunday. And there's gonna be some great things. First of all, you're gonna learn a lot about how you can actually get money out of politics. This isn't hypothetical, it's real. You actually can do it. Both the Republican and Democratic parties are generally fighting against that because they love money in politics, but there's a nonpartisan group. So if you go to wolf-pack.com/workshop, that's the workshop that's happening this weekend. You can register for free, so you could RSVP for free, so you can see all of what we're doing. And we're actually gonna have a lot of fun too. I'm gonna tell you about that in a second. But if you wanna be part of Team Cenk, go to wolf-pack.com/Cenk. Now, what's Team Cenk? The Wolfpack guys, they want me to run with the pack. So they got me doing a 5K and trying to monitor my steps. So if you want to do that with me and you monitor your steps too, and you can see my progress and we run for freedom together, let's make a run for it, okay? You go to wolf-pack.com/Cenk. And meanwhile, by the way, if you want to donate through either one of those, that's great. We love it. You don't have to, okay? And if you do $10 registration for the workshop, then you get to vote on the polls, you get to vote on making me do push-ups in the middle of the run, all these fun things. Anna and I are gonna play Pictionary on Saturday night. I don't want you to miss that. We're gonna sing karaoke. Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty are gonna join us for a panel. Larry Lessig, the preeminent expert on this issue and many others from Harvard Law, is going to come give a speech about how you actually can get money out of politics and show you the way to do it. So one more time, guys, sign up now. And again, you could do it for free. And I really want to see you guys there because this is when we all unite to make sure that we fight the corruption in Washington. So wolf-pack.com/workshop. Thank you. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right, well, one of the things that Republican lawmakers do not care about is being called hypocrites. They are hypocrites. They've proven themselves to be hypocrites. But when it comes to power being on the line, they'll go with power even if they know they're gonna be called hypocrites. And that's the case with filling the Supreme Court seat left vacant by Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing. Now, one of the wishes one of RBG's wishes before she passed, according to what her granddaughter says, was, my most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. Republicans don't care. In fact, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, is determined to hold a vote on Trump's pick. Here's what he said. In the last midterm election before Justice Scalia's death in 2016, Americans elected a Republican Senate majority because we pledged to check and balance the last days of a lame duck president's second term, President Trump's nominee will receive a vote on the floor of the United States Senate. But as you guys can recall, in 2016, Mitch McConnell specifically referenced the fact that Merrick Garland was the Supreme Court pick for Obama during an election year. So he was basically saying, it's an election year, this is not the right time, this is not when we do it. That was in February of 2016. Now fast forward to 2020, and there's a Supreme Court vacancy in September of 2020. And all of a sudden, Mitch McConnell says that he's going to go ahead and hold a vote for whoever Donald Trump nominates. Now, let me fast forward to Lindsey Graham. Following what happened to Garland in 2016, Lindsey Graham had some strong views on what should happen in the future. Let's take a look at what he said in 2016.
This is the last year of a lame duck president. And if Ted Cruz or Donald Trump get to be president, they've all asked us not to confirm or take up a selection by President Obama. So if a vacancy occurs in their last year of their first term, guess what? You will use their words against them. I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination. And you could use my words against me and you'd be absolutely right. We're setting a precedent here today, Republicans are, that in the last year, at least of a lame duck 8-year term, I would say it's going to be a 4-year term, that you're not going to fill a vacancy of the Supreme Court. This may make you feel better, but I really don't care. If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process is started, we'll wait to the next election. And I've got a pretty good chance of being the judiciary.
You're on the record.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold the tape.
He's on the record because he doesn't care if he decides to go against his own word and if people decide to call him hypocrites, because guess what? It doesn't matter. Republican voters are going to support Republican lawmakers and their quest for power. And that's what's happening today. On Saturday morning, Trump was resolute in his call for Ginsburg's seat to be filled immediately. He tweeted, quote, "We have this obligation without delay." A short time later, Graham responded, quote, "I fully understand where President Donald Trump is coming from," he said, retweeting the president's comments. "As to my view of filling a Supreme Court vacancy in 2020, I'd encourage you to review these most recent statements," he added, citing his remarks to NBC News in August that the rules have changed. They don't care, guys. And like, what amazes me, Cenk, and I know this probably drove you crazy too, is how many reporters over the weekend were like, oh, the hypocrisy. No one cares. No one cares. Yeah, they're hypocritical. They're gonna do what it takes to stack the courts with as many conservative judges as humanly possible. By the way, Chuck Schumer struck a deal with Senate Republicans to make that process a lot easier for them when it comes to the lower courts. And when it comes to a Supreme Court pick, of course they're gonna do what it takes to fill that seat with someone who is ideologically similar to them. It's just the way politics works. Anyone who thinks otherwise is incredibly naive and pathetic.
So almost all the reporters in Washington and almost the entire Democratic Party, and certainly all of Democratic leadership, act like it's 40 years ago. So what's the difference between now and 40 years ago? Well, what happened was a number of Supreme Court decisions in the late 1970s changed everything. They allowed corporations to give unlimited money to politicians, thereby purchasing the Republican and Democratic parties. And ever since that happened, the Republican Party became incredibly strong to the point of being absolutely vicious. And the Democratic Party became incredibly feckless when they used to be very strong under Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson would intimidate, bully, and get things passed and done. They were very effective. FDR, all these Democrats were super effective. Now they've become weaklings and losers because of the donor class. The donor class funds very strong Republicans and very weak Democrats. But the media still pretends that it's 40, 50 years ago. So the media will be like, oh my God, the Republicans are they being hypocritical? First of all, I mean, what kind of a schmuck are you? Your job is to cover politics, and you didn't notice until this moment that Republicans are hypocritical. Because they pay you to be neutral, to say, and every editor you have yells at you, don't worry about the facts, just make everything a he said, she said. Go get a quote from a Republican, go get a quote from a Democrat, and don't tell people what the reality is. Don't tell people that Mitch McConnell broke the record on filibustering, because that would make it seem one-sided. You know why? Because it is one-sided. And then he invented a thing called the McConnell rule, where you're not allowed to do Supreme Court picks in the last year before an election. And then he violated the McConnell rule 6 weeks before an election, because that's what Mitch McConnell does, and that's what the Republican Party does. And if you don't know that, and you still think it's 40, 50 years ago where they get into a bar, which is true, they used to, right? And they say, wait, are you a man of honor? And the other one would say, okay, fine, I'm a man of honor. And they'd spit into their hands and they'd do a handshake deal. And Biden and every anchor on CNN and Tim Kaine and all these folks still think we live in 1973, where they're gonna spit in their hand and do a deal, and the Republicans are gonna honor it. How stupid are you?
To which I say David Gergen. David Gergen, who is an advisor to Richard Nixon, he's now a contributor on cable news, probably gets paid top dollar for the expert commentary he provides, including incredibly dumb, short-sighted commentary that you're about to hear.
For all the obvious reasons it's so brazenly contemptuous of fair play, it is so hypocritical that I think you're going to see that the Republicans will pay a price at the polls this November over this issue. It is, I think, that, among other things, I think it makes it more likely that Joe Biden will win the election. It makes it more likely that the Democrats will take over the Senate. And if Biden is the president, and then next year when he tries to heal things, I think it's going to make polarization even more poisonous, almost irreversible.
That was insane. That's my opinion, but my opinion is based in fact and evidence. This has fired up Trump's base. This has fired up voters. And when it comes to the Supreme Court, I mean, historically speaking, Democratic voters seem to care less about Supreme Court nominees compared to Republican voters. I mean, Donald Trump has slapped his own base across the face over and over and over again. And when you ask them, what is it about Trump that you like? Why are you sticking by his side? They'll mention that Trump has stacked the courts with conservative judges. Also, Reuters had this poll to see how much of an influence this Supreme Court vacancy has for voters. And they found that 30% of American adults said that Ginsburg's death will make them more likely to vote for Biden, while 25% said they're now more likely to vote for Trump. But keep in mind that Donald Trump hasn't even really begun campaigning on this yet. This is an issue that a lot of voters care about. He's gonna really latch onto it and repeat how important it is for him to get reelected. And look, his voters were already super fired up to begin with. We'll talk about this later in the show. There are Trump supporters literally blocking people from voting, going into voting locations in Virginia, which has already begun early voting. I think it's crazy to think that these hypocritical politicians are gonna be punished. Bad boys for trying to accumulate power for Republican voters. They don't like that, okay? They wanna see that you're a man of your word. Come on, man.
It's just, now look, I know why people are on TV. Almost every one of them is put on there to maintain the current system and to keep the currently rich and powerful going forward. And so I'm not under any illusion that they're doing news. But the way that it works is not that somebody writes a memo. Sometimes that happens, but more rarely. It's that there's a groupthink. And so they hire everyone that has the same groupthink. And in that groupthink, they've now become complete schmucks and totally disassociated from reality. So to Anna's point, you think that there are Republican and independent voters who'll say, this offends my sense of fair play. You know what? I'm thinking of switching over and voting for a Democrat. On which planet? No, come on, really? Really, David Gerg, that's the analyst CNN brought on to say, well, it might offend their sense of fair play. Dude, inside your country club, that might be the case for 2 or 3 people, but that's not how voters are reacting now. Trump has lit the country on fire, and they haven't backed away 1 inch from him. You think they care about decorum? How could you possibly think that? How could you possibly think that? No, and so they appreciate that Trump is gonna go out there and McConnell's gonna go out there and go, yeah, I'm gonna break every goddamn rule there is to make sure we have power and not the black people and the brown people. And the crowd's gonna go nuts, right? And our side is supposed to say, we're going to protect women. We're going to make sure that they don't rob you of your liberty and your freedom to do what you want with your body, your most private choices. We're gonna take their big government hands off of your body. They're disgusting, and we're gonna fight back against them. Have you seen any Democrat do that? I mean, you'll see AOC later, but have you seen any corporate Democrats? Have you seen any of that? Nothing. Instead, they're like, oh, I do declare the Queensberry rules have been violated. We're going to beseech the American people that we go back to Queensberry rules, really, and we promise that we'll totally surrender because we will then prove that we are the nice guys, and that is why people will vote for us. And this is how Democrats lose all elections. Look, one last thing that's empirical. They said, you know what, the McConnell rule last time around, not confirming Merrick Garland, was an outrage, and it was. It broke every precedent. There was no such rule. They invented it. Everybody knew it, and people pointed out that it was completely outrageous to hold that up for over a year. And guess what happened? According to David Gergen and CNN and the New York Times and NPR, then the Democrats should have easily won the presidential election because the Republicans broke decorum. And who won? Do anybody remember? Oh, right, Donald Trump won. And did David Gergen or any other pundit on TV take that into consideration? Nope. It's 1973, and if we follow decorum, we will win. Insane. Let me say one last thing here. Brian Schatz is a Democratic senator. He tweeted this out, and there's something very telling in the middle of it. He said, it's going to be very hard after the procedural violence that Mitch McConnell has inflicted on the Senate and the country for anyone to justify us playing it soft next year just to satisfy pundits. I like what he's saying, but look at the assumption built in, and he's not wrong about the assumption. Every idiot pundit on TV will go on like David Gergen, and Schatz said this before Gergen went on. Will go on and go, oh, the Democrats should surrender to the Republicans and play really, really nice. And once they've landed another Supreme Court seat and we're screwed for 30 years and they take away all of our rights, then we shall declare to the American people that they are bad boys and we are good boys. Losers. You should never listen to those pundits. And by the way, Brian Schatz, again, he's right about all this. And all the other Democratic senators, turn off your TV. Those morons are costing you elections. If you actually care to win an election, you listen to a progressive pundit.
All right, we'll be right back.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your active ID more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Don't forget our Get Out the Vote special tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you tune in for that. Anna, what's next?
Well, the Department of Justice is retaliating against democratically run cities. So Trump's DOJ, under the leadership of William Barr, has basically cited cities such as New York, Seattle, and Portland as anarchist cities. And the purpose for that is to see if they could prevent the flow of federal money going to these municipalities. So the Trump administration has accused them of tolerating protests while decrying federal intervention. And so this is how they're punishing them. New York City, Portland, and Seattle are on a list of anarchist cities that Trump officials say have failed to stem crime linked to a summer of protests. Now, this is a follow-up of a memo that Trump released earlier this month. That memo directed Attorney General William Barr to identify jurisdictions that have permitted violence and the destruction of property to persist and have refused to undertake reasonable measures to counteract these criminal activities slash anarchist jurisdictions. So I want to just mention real quick that there's a ton of criminality that takes place within the Trump administration. We know that, we've detailed that. But if you want to focus solely on what happens during these protests, let us not forget that in case after case, especially in cities like New York, for instance, we have seen looting take place with cops nearby, and the cops do nothing about it. Instead, they had focused their force and their brutality toward peaceful protesters. They allowed the looting to take place. They turned a blind eye to that. And for some reason, it's the city's fault that the police chose to be brutal toward peaceful protesters and ignore the property damage that the Trump administration pretends to care so much about.
Yeah, there is no such thing as this city is now in anarchy and we will cut off your funding. Where does that say in the Constitution? What are you talking about? This is just totally invented thing out of whole cloth. We now declare you anarchists. Okay, I declare you the Easter Bunny. So what? So of course the whole point is to cut off funding. And is that constitutional? I mean, there's nothing to do with the Constitution. So they're gonna try to, again, bend every law to their favor to try to score political points. I'm kind of bummed LA didn't make the list. I was planning on going out tonight and being like, there's anarchy, let's go nuts. Okay.
Well, just wait, because they're still gonna consider other cities. Now, things didn't get too heated in Los Angeles during the protest. There were some scuffles with cops, that certainly happened. But most of the headlines had to do with the fight between protesters and cops in those particular cities, in Portland, Seattle, and New York.
And they're putting these cities on a list. Why? Because they said, because they were doing protests that they don't like. These are from the guys who are in favor of freedom of speech, and they're against cancel culture. They're trying to cancel whole cities at a time. The world's largest hypocrites. All right, we have an amazing post-game show for you guys. Don't miss it. Hit the join button below or tyt.com/join. We'll see you there right now.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.